David, you got about 30
Hi,
seconds.
Conley.
Get up here, David.
See you before you leave, please.
You got 30 seconds.
25.
Like that.
I love those kind of houses. It's time to call the meeting of the Florence City Council to order. Okay. First item is discussion and presentation. Josh, would you like to introduce Linda Ain?
Sure would. So it's been a long time since we discussed franchise agreements. For some of you, it's probably the first time that we've ever had this discussion. I don't know if you were part of the trash one or not. It's a little bit different. They're not too difficult to comprehend, but we do use outside counsel for all franchise agreements within the city. And tonight we have with us who I consider the Michael Jordan of franchise agreements, which is a big statement. Miss Linda Ain is here from Florida to kind of walk us through.
Lexington, Kentucky as well. We live in Florida and Lexington both. Thank you for the introduction, Josh. I was just telling Pat, I can't even remember how long it's been since I've been representing the city of Florence. It's been over 20 years, and I'm very proud to be representing you again. For those of you who don't know anything about franchising law, if that's okay, basically under Kentucky law, it's section 163 and 164 of the Kentucky Constitutions, cities are required to have franchises for all folks that use their rights of way. And so tonight, and those franchises cannot, there are very few requirements in the Constitution, but the Constitution requires that the franchises be advertised for bid and that they be no longer than 20 years. So those are the requirements. So you have a franchise with Owen Electric and Duke Energy currently for electric, and that's what we're going to be discussing tonight, the electric franchise. That franchise is currently expired, but not to worry, under Kentucky law, if a franchise is expired, you basically go on a month-to-month tenancy. So as long as the parties want to continue, they continue under the current franchise. But it's best practices to have a current franchise. What typically franchises regulate two things. They regulate the use of the rights of way, and they also typically have a payment similar to rent. If the city had an apartment building, you would typically get rent for that apartment building for folks that were using that apartment building. Typically, franchises require the users of the rights of way to pay a franchise fee. It's not a tax. It is similar to rent in that it's a fee for using the rights of way. Historically, the city of Florence has not charged a franchise fee. And so that will be a policy decision going forward, whether you all want to charge a franchise fee. And I believe that Josh has provided you with the franchise fees that communities across the state and across northern Kentucky are charging. Typically, my clients charge between 3 and 5% of gross revenues. And so you have a couple options with regard to the franchise fee section of the franchise. You could A, do nothing and not charge a franchise fee. That option would tie you, and typically the franchises are for 20 years. Your last one was for 20 years, and typically they're between 10 and 20 years. And that again is definitely a policy call for the city as to whether you want a 5, 10, or 20. I would say a lot of my clients go with a 20-year franchise or a 10-year franchise. If you do so, you're locking in future councils to having no franchise fees. So that's one option, to have no franchise fees. Second option, would be to, in your ordinance, set out that at this time, this council chooses not to, assess franchise fees, but reserving the right to assess franchise fees in the future with, let's say, 90 days notice to the providers. And that's a really good option that some of my clients go for, because, you know, if your community doesn't need the franchise fee, the revenue from the franchise fees now, that's fine. But it allows future councils, if they do need that revenue, to collect revenue. A lot of my clients do this way. They set a franchise fee at 3%, but then they reserve the option to have the fees go to 5%. So, you know, that gives communities, typically communities who are charging fees and are happy with the fees that they are collecting, will go with that option. You know, to say we'll stay at 3%, but we want to have the option to go to 5%. So the process for this is, I guess, does anyone have any questions? I'm sure you all have questions on this.
I'll just add, in your packets, you received a memo from me. I did not include the different percentages breakdown. I will go over those when Linda's done, of what other municipalities are charging locally and throughout the state.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions? David?
Thank you. I might be incorrect here, or correct, I don't know. For some reason, it sounds like we had this once before proposed to us, and I think Florence denied it at that time. It was some years ago on there. You remember Mr. Neighbor on Mr. Skis when he was the attorney?
Yes, sir.
Am I correct on that?
Yes, sir.
I ain't lost it yet.
Just to be clear about what you're asking, David, are you saying that we adopted a franchise agreement, but we opted to have no franchise fee? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
That is correct. It was, the franchise, that was enacted in 1993, that the expired franchise. So you're correct, Eric.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Linda, can you kind of just walk them through, so an ordinance will be passed and that is what is bid?
So, yeah, so this is the typical process. I will work with Josh after you all have decide some critical issues, especially the franchise fee issue. I'll work with Josh to draft a franchise. I will then send a copy of that draft to both Owen and to Duke Energy, so they can review it, and we can iron out kinks. So we don't want to put something out for bid that the providers are not going to bid on. So we will, I'll work with Josh and your staff to get that ordinance a draft. Then once the parties are okay with the draft ordinance will come back to council for first and second reading. And if you all have any questions about it at that time or during the process. After the ordinance has first reading, the ordinance actually acts as the bid specs. So then we put it out for bid we advertise for bids pursuant to the terms and conditions of the ordinance. And then the electric providers will bid on the franchise, and we'll review those bids to make sure that they've complied with the terms and conditions of the ordinance, and then we'll come back to the council with ordinances accepting the bids and authorizing the mayor to sign the franchise agreements. The franchise agreements typically are a page or two, because they basically say the parties agree that the terms and conditions of the franchise agreement are set out in the ordinance.
Linda, we also, have, consideration, perhaps, just putting the franchise fee on commercial and industrial users. Is that something that is sometimes done?
So, in my experience, I've had franchises which were just on residential and excluded commercial and industrial. So there's precedent for doing that. I have not had any clients that I can think of that just do commercial and other business opportunities, commercial and industrial, excuse me. But I think if you treat all classes the same, I think that would be okay. That you just want to treat all classes the same. You don't want an equal protection argument with regard to that. As long as you're teaching all classes the same in the city, I think that would be okay.
Anything else?
Yeah, I have a few things. So, real quick on just some other like cities. They're not real like cities. They're close cities. Ellesmere is in between a 3 and 5% franchise. Fort Wright is at 5%. Independence is 3.5%. Newport 3%. Union is at 3%. And they vary. So, just a conversation I had with somebody from Duke today. I was kind of telling him how we're going to be going through this process tonight. He said it's an absolute rarity that Florence doesn't have a franchise fee. And even throughout the state, it's kind of a rarity because it's one of the ways that Kentucky cities can generate revenue. And so with that, in the memo, Linda went through these different options that you have. What my recommendation was is I don't think that there's an appetite from this council to immediately implement a franchise fee at this current time. But a 20-year agreement is a long agreement, and nobody can predict what's going to happen tomorrow, much less 5 years down the road. So, I think it would be in the best interest of the city to not handcuff us and allow a future council, whether that be you or somebody else, to when they're looking at the budget every year, it's something that they can analyze as another tool to generate revenue. Maybe you would implement this on commercial and industrial users and not have to raise property taxes, or whatever the scenario may be. This is another tool in the toolkit to evaluate when it comes to looking at the money coming in and the money going out.
The other thing that was discussed today at our meeting is the taxing options in the state of Kentucky may be overhauled, and
Sure.
we may be getting the short end of the stick there.
Yeah.
We may be scrambling for revenue.
It's going to a sales tax formula, which is very similar to Tennessee, and as everybody on this council knows, our bread and butter is payroll. And what that means for local payroll options is kind of up in the air. You have Lexington and Louisville that certainly want a sales tax type of formula. They want that Tennessee model of taxing. Northern Kentucky is not on board with that. We have large employment hubs. We also generate a lot of sales tax, so I think we would come out all right in that. I've never really reviewed math. It's 10 to 15 years down the road if it is to take place, but this could be very important. Maybe it does happen within the next 20 years, and this is something that we have to implement to offset the cost of the occupational license fees that we would lose if the state so choose to remove the payroll fees from us.
Josh, I'd just like to say, I think leaving us the option to do that down the road, I think is very smart on our part. We're not asking for anything now, and see how the city changes. If it changes and we need to do something, then we can address it. We're not handcuffed where we can't do anything.
Mayor, I think the elephant in the room that we need to discuss, actually two elephants, is number one, what would a particular percentage franchise generate in revenue? We need to have an idea about that.
I can tell you. So if you looked at it for all accounts at a 3% rate, it would be about $1.5 million. If you did a 5%, it'd be about $2.5 million.
And then the other elephant in the room is, what is the process or the procedure that utilities do to pass that on to their customers?
That's a very good question. It's a line item on the bill. So I live in Lexington, and on my electric bill is a line item of 5%.
Mayor, just real quick, I got a comment, just something for you guys to think about as you're considering this, that maybe you haven't yet. So as you know, in our right-of-ways, we also have water and sewer. So with having gas and electric and other things in our right-of-way, when we have to do a replacement project, oftentimes, and we're experiencing it now, we have to move. So let's say we're replacing a water line, it's in the grass, in between the sidewalk and the street. We gotta keep that water main live, so what we're doing is we're taking that water main in a lot of cases and moving it to the street. So, because the other side has got electric and gas in the right of way, so we can't go over there. We've already got a water main currently and maybe a sewer main, so now we got, in order to replace this main, it's costing us more to replace this water main in the street. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind as you think about, maybe wanting to add a fee to recoup some of those costs that we're having to, when we replace these water mains or sewer. So.
And rest assured, if we wanted to put any kind of utility on an electric pole, whether it be a camera or a water repeater, they're gonna charge us a fee for utilizing their poles. It's a very common thing throughout the utility world.
Linda, do you see that process in other cities where they charge a fee for repair and such?
Well, they charge, under their tariff, they can charge, if you all want to get up on a pole to put a security light, what have you, they can charge that. Typically, so they can charge. To address Eric's concern, there are communities, and this is something that if you were to assess a fee, they put it in a fund to only for capital right-of-way projects. So that could be, a lot of cities like the flexibility of putting it into the general fund, and then some cities, feel better with it going into a specific fund for a certain purpose. And you could set that out in the ordinance if you wanted to, or if you decide to take the option of reserving the right to assess franchise fees, at that time when that council, whoever was on that council at that time, could then set up the fund, because then you'd have actual money to fund the fund.
Any other questions for Linda, or any comments? Linda, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I'll just make a quick comment. It sounds real simple when you stand up there and you talk about it, but the intricacies that are involved it's pretty intense, and takes a lot of expertise to put these things together. Having worked with you on the cable franchise. We all laugh because it took like 2 years.
Hopefully this will be a quicker process.
It was so long, but yeah, it's without having special counsel on board to help us through some of these kinds of things, it would be extremely difficult for us to be able to handle this on our own, so we do appreciate it.
Oh, I love coming up here, so.
Yeah.
And I'll continue to work with Josh, and whatever you all decide, Josh will let me know.
I will. So I guess I'm not asking for any kind of official action on this, but a general consensus of what I recommend. Does that sound in line with what you think we should do? Which is to reserve the right to impose a franchise fee later down the road. We don't want to handcuff our hands for 20 years and not be able to ever charge a franchise fee. That's really the question.
We do not want a franchise fee at this time.
Or, yeah, you could go not to choose a
Well, I'm
franchise
saying-
fee at the time.
Not at this time, but reserve the right. That's
Correct.
what your recommendation is.
Yes.
Okay.
Thoughts on that? We go with that? I can draft the documents up, get them for y'all to review, and we can talk about what that looks like on paper. Okay.
Do we have general agreement on that?
I think it makes
I
sense.
saw a lot of head shaking, so I'm going with it.
Okay,
Very good, thank you.
thank you.
Next item is discussion. It's consideration of resolution R 24007A of Boone County Planning Commission, recommending approval with conditions for the request of Turfway Commons Trust per Eric Fagan, the applicant owner for a change in concept development plan for approximate 10.3 acre area located at 4999 Houston Road, Florence, Kentucky, which is currently zoned C2 PD HDO. And so, Josh, did you want to talk about this, or
Sure.
Pat, or Gary, or?
Yeah, we can all talk about it. This one's actually really simple. So this is orient you with where you're at. This is a picture looking at, everybody knows where, if you have kids, you know where the Phi is. I think they call it, what do they call it?
Sky Zone
now. The Guitar Center. David here will remember this as the former Walmart site, right? So it's, if you're going back some years, this is where Walmart originally was in Florence. This is the strip center that we're talking about. Specifically, we're talking about, you see these numbers on top of the building here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That is what, if you read in your packets, that is what it's discussing. Each one of these numbers means something as you get into the packet. So this is the rear of the building. It's kind of funny, if you went back there, within the last 8 months, it was like walking into a 1990 Walmart. Nothing had changed. The bathrooms were still there, the Walmart logos were still up. This was kind of a little time capsule back to the future on it. But a lot of vacant space. So what you have is you have these different retailers come in, Defy, Guitar Center. They didn't need nowhere near the square footage that Walmart had. So you had large amounts of areas that were going on lease, weren't being utilized. And Eric Fagan, who is a local owner, purchased this strip center within the last 2 years, and he's wanting to do something with it. So in the area that is labeled as 1, that is being proposed as kind of like a technology company. You don't go in there to buy computers. What they do is they buy bulk computers from auctions or online. They rebuild those computers and they ship them out. So it's like an IT company. The space 2 there is going to be a baseball academy. That's what they would like to utilize that space for. And then the spaces 3A, 3B, and 3C is basically just storage. So because this is in the Houston Road Overlay District, and some of these use categories really didn't fall in line with what the Overlay District called for, he had to go through the long range process, so that's what we're here to talk about tonight. Really, when we were reviewing it, the 2 things, and I know Pat and Gary had the same comments. First thing you think about is, okay, this is the rear of the building. What are we doing from a fire lane perspective? We're asking, there's gonna be people back there, everybody here who has a kid that's played baseball has been to some sort of batting cage or baseball academy. They can be out of control with parking and they can park right on top of the building. We didn't wanna create any kind of life safety issue. So they have established parking that's in the conditions. They actually are going to sublease and enter into a shared parking agreement with the go-kart place that abuts this property. And they've got a parking plan laid out. So they got the parking addressed. They're doing some repairs to the curb to make sure nobody can park on the side of the building or block hydrants. So they got the fire code items taken care of as well. And really, beyond that, we really didn't have any kind of issues with it. I mean, there's some conditions from the county that mostly were related around parking and signage and things like that. Some improvements that need to be done with the building. But this was really a simple request. We think it makes a lot of sense. It gets a little bit more, at least 2 new businesses into the city, a couple more services. And Gary, Pat, did I miss anything? Okay.
I just wanted to say, as far as the baseball use, the concerns that we had were people coming and going and where they're gonna park and that kind of thing. And the thought process of the property, the lessee of the property is that it's more of a private academy. So lessons would be 8, 10 kids at a time. So you won't have, it won't be like the D1 up in Hebron where you have, 75 kids there at the same time. It's not that type of a facility. It's a little more individualized attention for the kids. So we were pretty comfortable with I think what are they, 7 or 8 spaces right across,
Yeah.
that they've made arrangements for, it'll be lighted, it's leased to them. We're gonna put a crosswalk there, right?
They're gonna put a crosswalk, and then there's 25 spaces, kind of, you know, within walking distance away, that parents and people can utilize as well to the right of that black roof. You can see
Yeah, if you see the black roof, then you can see there's some parking spaces right there, and that they'll be able to just walk right around and on the sidewalk and go into the building. They're gonna be changing that entrance, but they haven't decided what it's gonna look like yet. They're trying to figure out what they can put there that won't get shattered by baseball.
You had some concerns about garage doors and such. Can you
Sure.
address that?
Yeah, they did address those, and they're working with, drawing a blank on the company, but that was all approved through the building department and the planning commission as well. Forget what company it is.
Painted on it.
They brought in a design professional to analyze those.
The main thing to address was the fire issues, the electrical panel on the wall and all that.
Yeah.
And our fire department signed off everything.
Yep, they're good, we always make sure that they review it.
Any other questions? Alright, we'll have this on the agenda for the next item, or on the agenda for the next meeting. Alright. For the mayor's report, we'll have a street renaming ceremony in honor of Betsy Conrad. It's scheduled for tomorrow here at 3 p.m. Everyone is welcome to join us. Public Services will have their night out Tuesday, May 21st at the Florence Mall parking lot from 4 to 6:30. It's always a great time. Eric, got anything you want to add?
No, I just ask everybody to come join us. We'll have some food that's been donated. We'll have our department out there, lots of equipment for the kids to get in and honk some horns. Everybody loves that. And then we'll have some other displays and activities and stuff for kids. It's always a pretty good showing, so encourage everybody to come out.
We are still accepting applications for participants in Memorial Day Parade. Application deadline is this Friday. The Memorial Day Parade will be held Monday, May 27th, and the parade will begin at Boone County High School at 10 a.m. It will end at the Florence Government Center. Following the parade, we will have our Memorial Day ceremony here on the Government Center campus at the Boone County Veterans Memorial. Our Florence Aquatic Center is gonna open on Saturday, May 25th. Can't believe it's already time for that to happen. But the water is filled correctly. And hours of operation will be 11 to 7. City offices will be closed on Memorial Day, May 7th, in observance of the holiday. Is there anyone on council desire recognition?
What time is the public services night out?
4 to 6:30. Any department heads? Anyone in the audience? All right, please come to the podium, state your name, address.
Madam Mayor, my name is Michael Tom. I'm very emotional right now, and I do apologize. I live at 3 Cardinal Drive across the street. I was never informed, I was not given a single notice that the address was being changed on the property that I purchased 2 years ago from Howard Gangloff. Nobody, not one city official sent me a letter and tell me that you as a resident of the city of Florence is going to have to spend money to have your address changed. Nobody told me that. I own an accounting firm. Not an accounting firm, I'm a sole practitioner. I've been a sole practitioner for 20 years. I've traveled all over the United States. I deal with medium to large corporations and trusts. I'm a CFO for hire. I go to their facility. My wife owns a company called Curious Cottage. Unfortunately, that was shut down during the pandemic. She did events where she designed clothing and sold it at events. Events are not coming back. Her $85,000 a year that she made at Curious Cottage is no longer. So she spent the last 4 years locked into her room in research and development to design a product to be manufactured here in the state of Kentucky with a paint company that manufactures here in the state of Kentucky, a veteran-owned and operated women's business, and is now going to be shut down again by the government. I'm outraged. We are on our final approval of the trademark, an approval that was, the final submission was sent in November of last year. It takes 8 months for approval. We're on the final stage. We're due for this to be approved in July of this year from the federal government. There's a lot of approvals, as you guys may know, just sitting in this meeting. It's difficult working with the government. The federal government is even worse. We had to get permission from the Veterans Administration to have the stamp of a veteran-owned business put on our packaging. This is a sample of the packaging that we'll be designing, manufacturing here in the state. If we can. We don't know, because we may have to go bankrupt here right now. We had to have approval for the veterans. We had to have approval for the paint code, for the non-toxic, to make sure it met. All this through the Department of Commerce, through the US government. Very difficult. The final stage was the copyrights and trademark. This. That has to be approved before we could sell this in stores, to be listed on Amazon, or to sell in parks and recreations to the United States government, which is one of our goals. We've gotten interest in pre-orders and everything else. We just have to get there. In order to get there, we first have to have the approval so we can get a pre-order, so we can then set up a manufacturing facility and do it. We have our entire life put into this company. My wife couldn't be here today because she's been locked in her room since Thursday, when we found out that the city changed our address and caused a resident in violation of the 14th Amendment. We're both U.S. veterans, and we supported and defended that Constitution. Just to have it pushed away from us, and our company is done. I'm sorry for myself being so emotional, but I don't know what to do anymore. My entire life is gone just so we can have it the Tom Gill way. I'm outraged. I've been a resident for this city since 2013. I don't know what to do anymore. I still haven't been notified by this city of what my actual new address is. Somebody has a duty to inform me of that. Nobody has. I asked that the city rescind that order and change that name back to Cardinal where it's supposed to be. Tom Gill is not even on my street. There are 2 houses. The good people that live next to me in one Cardinal, there's about 6 adults that live in there, a family. Good people. Get up every day, go to work. Quiet. They don't party, they don't raid ruckus. It's a nice, quiet neighborhood. That's why my wife and I chose to go ahead and make that our final home. Our daughter, a resident of Florence, just lives down the road with all of our grandchildren. I also take care of my disabled son, who has a broken back and has severe mental issues, and I'm his official caretaker. Now all of this has to be changed. All of my business contracts has to be changed. I'm going to incur tens of thousands of dollars in costs. I have to hire an attorney to rewrite land contracts because I own a farm down in Liberty, Kentucky. I own an additional property at Kings Mountain, Kentucky. All that stuff has to be changed. And I had to, and it's going to cost me tens of thousands of dollars. Only because Tom Gill paid Howard Gangroff $3,000 and John, the owner of the other one, $3,000. So they were signing consent to have the name changed to his name. That's all I have to say. I'm outraged. I don't know what to do. I yield to you guys to do the right thing. We have not been informed, and at least change it back for 90 days and have a due processing hearing to hear from the actual residents. Both of the people that were paid were non-residents of this city. Tom Gill is a resident of Cincinnati, not the city of Florence. Yes, he has a successful car lot there, but there was also 4 other successful car lots down the road too. And the road that his car lot name is still not changed. It's still Commerce. That wasn't changed. But the road with the two houses on it was changed. I have nothing else to say. I'm outraged.
Well, thank you, Mr. Tomlin, for coming, speaking to council. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Thank your wife for her service. I know that you have spoken with Josh, and I know that, there is some caveats to this. I think we have a path forward for you to retain your 3 Cardinal address, but the owner, I guess Josh can
Sure, yeah.
speak through
So
that
it's
process.
actually, council doesn't even have to approve it because there's still legal access on the remaining portion of Cardinal Drive. This address can be switched back to 3 Cardinal Drive, but because the recorded property owner, Mr. Gangoff, signed off, there's a legal binding document signing off, giving permission for the road name change. He has to sign off on the address change it back. We can facilitate that.
He told me today in a 3-hour meeting because he sold that property to me 2 years ago. Even though it's not a recorded, that's a gentleman's agreement.
Okay.
Because of how we wrote the contract up.
Sure.
Okay? I'm very heavily invested into this company.
Sure.
And I need to be able to pull a VA loan and the property needs to be brought up to value. So I invested an additional $40,000 into it. I have $175,000 worth of equity in that property. He has a sliding scale of $125,000. I have all the legal documents signed and notarized to show that I am the owner of that property, even though it's not recorded. And Howard Gangloff did tell me that he called Tom Gill's attorney and rescinded that station, and he was never compensated for it, so therefore it's nil and void anyway.
So we do have to work through a process, so I would encourage you possibly, I don't want to
Just
talk from
whatever
this, from your
document you
seat.
need signed,
So,
I'll get it signed.
We will work through that process, and I encourage you to talk to Mr.
Then the
Honey
problem
after the
solved. I
meeting.
mean, this really is a very simple issue. If he's willing to sign the document, we'll make it right. So,
Okay.
no concerns there.
All right, any other discussion?
Sir, you had your thoughts that you shared with us and
Yes.
such, and of course, Josh has been in contact with you. The whole gist of it is that the property owners per se signed off on it. And of course, you weren't a property owner on record, and that's kind of how you got out of the loop. And what Josh is sharing with you is because of that, that doesn't seem to be fair to us, to you. And as a result of that, once we go through a couple of hoops and hurdles, we're gonna let your property remain at 3 Cardinal Drive. That'll be the name of it. That'll be this. So, you have had a lot of anxiety about this the last couple of weeks. And we think we have the answer. And if you'll stick close to Josh, we're gonna work through this so that you won't have to be concerned about it in the future. But that is it in a nutshell. The property owner sold off.
I guess, sir, my major concern is the fact that I am a resident of the state of Kentucky.
Sure.
In the city of Florence.
Yes.
And I am given the protections under the U.S. Constitution to the right to due process. And I was not given that right. Even though Howard is a registered landowner, the Constitution does not say landowners only. It says citizens of the United States, as I am a citizen of the United States. And even though Howard Gangloff does not have to change anything because of this $3,000 deal that he made with Tom Gill. He doesn't have to change his IDs or anything else. He is not being deprived of his liberties because he has to go out and take care of all this other business because the government changed it. He is not being deprived of his monies and properties because of this. The residents are. I am, my wife, the good people of 1 Cardinal. They're the ones that are being deprived. We're the ones that have to pay for everything. You know, it's not cheap. When you go out, you have to pay for your driver's license. That's not free. Even going downstairs, just a registration is a minimum of $15 plus whatever else fees there are now. You know, everything keeps going up and everybody has fees. And if you have different lands and you have to get attorneys involved to write this stuff, if I have to rechange this again, and then I'll be delayed again for 8 months on this, these are deprivation. We're being deprived of this because the city just didn't send us a letter. A simple, hey, we're having a hearing on this, your street is proposed to be changed, do you have any concerns? I would have been here back then. I believe I read it was in October. In November, we submitted our final copy. In November. It's outrage, and I do want to make it right. I don't want to have to bring this into a big nasty battle with anybody. I want it right. You know, and I'm fine if the city
Just
wants.
be patient, we'll work through it, and I think we will find a resolution. But I do appreciate your being entrepreneurial and wanting to make the best of your business and wanting to dedicate all your time and energy, and your wife, it sounds like she's dedicating her time and energy as well, and just allow us to work through it. So thank you.
But it's gonna be
Thank you.
3 cardinal, that's what you need to hear.
That's what I need to
If
hear.
we
I
can
need
get the
the-
property owner to sign off.
Yep, just need
We
Mr.
just need
Ganoff.
them to sign off on it.
Yep.
It's not gonna be on our
Just
control.
whatever document you need, I'll get him to sign off
We'll
on
work through
it.
it.
He's my client, he's the other thing.
All right, is there anything else? Otherwise, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Mr. Carroll, Mr. Nguyen, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.